the Council of Nicaea and the official Bible. In the year 325 A.D., in the heart of the Roman Empire under the command of Emperor Constantine, an unprecedented event is convened. Bishops from across the Christian world gather in Nicaea, a city in Asia Minor. The goal? To unify the faith. But behind the prayers and sacred robes, a silent battle is raging, a struggle for power, doctrine, and for the official version of God's story. This is the first ecumenical council in history. More than 300 bishops have been called by the emperor, not by a pope, nor by a religious authority, but by a politician. Why? Because Christianity, until then persecuted, had become a useful tool to unify the empire. Constantine does not seek divine truths. He seeks stability. And to achieve this, he needs a church without divisions. Until that moment, Christianity was a mosaic of beliefs. There were gospels that spoke of a human Jesus, others of a divine being from birth. Some saw Mary as a virgin mother, others as an ordinary woman. There were Gnostic, Docetist, and adoptionist communities. 3rd century Christianity wasn't a single entity. It was a collection of movements that shared some ideas about Jesus, but with very different interpretations. The Council of Nicaea marked the beginning of the process of selecting an official version, and that version had to be uniform, to avoid conflicts, so that everyone from Spain to Egypt professed the same faith, but that meant eliminating voices, silencing texts, expelling those who disagreed, and the Bible? Although many believe that Nicaea decided which books should be in it, the truth is a little more complex. At Nicaea, the Bible was not formally canonized, but a key step was taken, defining what doctrine was acceptable and what was heresy. No list of books was voted on, but theological positions present in certain Gospels were condemned. For example, if it was considered heresy to say that Jesus was not of divine nature, then any text that insinuated this was automatically suspect. In other words, it wasn't said, "This gospel is out," but it was said, "This idea is unacceptable." And if a gospel supported that idea, its fate was sealed. One of the great debates of the council was the relationship between Jesus and God the Father. Arius appeared here, a priest who taught that Jesus was created by God and therefore was neither eternal nor equal to him. This caused a real storm. Arius's proposal called into question the absolute divinity of Jesus. For those who argued otherwise, this was unacceptable, because if Jesus was not God, then his death and resurrection lost value as universal salvation. Arius's doctrine was condemned as heresy. And with that, all the texts that resonated with his ideas began to disappear from the official liturgy. There was no need to burn them. It was enough to stop copying them. Oblivion was their sentence. From the Council of Nicaea emerged the Nicene Creed, a declaration of faith still recited by millions of Christians today. It affirms that Jesus is God from God, light from light, true God from true God, begotten, not made, of one substance with the Father. This technical, almost philosophical language has a clear intention: to close the door to alternative interpretations, to establish an orthodoxy that would serve as the basis for all of Christianity. But what happened to the other texts? Where were the other voices that spoke of a different Jesus, of a different vision of the soul, of the world, of God? Not all were destroyed. Some were hidden, buried, forgotten, until modern discoveries brought them to light. But that's another story. In the second part of this chapter, we will explore the process that led, centuries later, to the definitive formation of the biblical canon. Who decided which books were the Word of God? And why were some considered dangerous? After the Council of Nicaea, a new orthodoxy was imposed, but the history of the Bible as we know it didn't end there. In fact, it was just beginning. A crucial step remained: defining exactly which texts would be considered sacred and which would remain forever. During the 4th and 5th centuries, bishops and theologians devoted themselves to collecting, comparing, and debating the texts circulating among Christian communities. There were dozens of Gospels, letters, apocalypses, and writings attributed to apostles and prophets. Some were popular throughout entire regions. Others were known only to a few. There wasn't just one Bible. There were many, and what was sacred to one community could be heretical to another. The canonization process was slow, fraught with political, cultural, and theological tensions. In 367, Athanasius of Alexandria wrote a letter listing, for the first time, the 27 books of the New Testament as we know them today. This list didn't yet have universal authority, but it would lead the way. Over the following centuries, regional councils such as those of Hippo, 393, and Carthage, 397, reaffirmed this election. Finally, in 1546, the Council of Trent, already in the midst of the Protestant Reformation, officially confirmed the Catholic biblical canon. More than 1,000 years after Nicaea, the canon was not a single, sudden decision. It was a construction, and, like all construction, it involved overthrowing other options. Texts that were not included in the official list were condemned, banned, or simply ignored. And what texts were left out? Some of the best known are the apocryphal Gospels, the Gospel of Thomas, the Gospel of Philip, the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, also the Gospel of Judas, the Apocalypse of Peter, the Gospel of the Egyptians, among many others. Many of these texts offered very different visions of Jesus, sometimes more mystical, sometimes more human. Some spoke of self-knowledge as a path to salvation. Others presented Mary Magdalene as a spiritual leader. For the official church, these ideas were dangerous. The criterion was not only theological, it was also political. A text that questioned the authority of bishops, or that promoted spiritual autonomy, was a threat to the ecclesiastical order. Power is not only exercised with swords or laws, it is also exercised with ideas. Controlling what is read, what is preached, what is believed, is a form of domination as effective as any army. Many texts were destroyed, but others survived in secret. Copies hidden in caves, in distant monasteries, among persecuted communities. For centuries, they were forgotten. Until the 20th century, they began to reappear. The discoveries of Nag Hammadi and the Dead Sea Scrolls changed everything. They allowed us to see that the history of Christianity was much more diverse than official tradition taught us. Today, these forbidden texts invite us to ask questions, to look at the faith from other angles, not to destroy it, but to understand its complexity, because perhaps understanding what was excluded helps us better understand what was accepted. In the next chapter, we'll discuss one of those rediscovered texts, the controversial Gospel of Judas, a story that challenges the traditional image of history's most famous traitor.